first and foremost, I mean, I guess the TLDR here when it comes to this is an Ice Shard sorcerer, okay? So I would say the main strengths of this build is the fact that you have high mobility and you have fairly decent AoE damage, and through the use of like stuns and basically freezing things, you're able to lock down the battlefield and deal with packs. Your biggest issue with this build and what stops you from like pushing into super high tiers with this, and this is everything that I'm saying right now is post patch. Okay, so it's valid for post patch because I did do that nightmare dungeon there, and the things that feel the same still feel the same, and there where we notice a difference is obviously from survivability and stuff, which is already a problem for this build. But it's not just for this build, it's for this class. Sorcerer struggles a lot with survivability. So I think this build is still viable as a level up build. It's not like there's many of them to begin with. The sorcerer is super starved for builds to begin with, but it is still viable to do. But I also want to mention that I would imagine that there are different stages in the building a Ice Shards sorcerer, and the stages would be when you're just starting out and you're starting to assemble the gear, and I will mention what that means. And then when you are, let's say, at the point where you are now actually having a huge bunch of the aspects that you need for the build to work, but you still have mana issues, and then we would call it the final stages when you've conquered your mana issues and that's not really a problem anymore. Okay, so first and foremost, I think probably it makes the most sense to just go to the fucking skill tree. That's probably where we want to start. So I will some of the decisions in the skill tree will make a lot more sense when we look at the aspects. They'll also make a lot more sense when we talk about the Paragon tree later, and also the skills, or rather the spells that we choose for enchantments. But looking at the skill tree itself, we're going to put 2 points into Firebolt. You could put 1 point into Firebolt and 1 into Enhance. It doesn't matter. But this is our first skill that we pick. We need this for enchantments and basically for leveraging an additional way for us to deal a huge amount of damage. So whether you put 2 in here and 1, it doesn't matter. The point is you need to put 2 in here so we can go to the next step here. Over here is the bread and butter of the damage of the build. Okay? So you've got 5 in Ice Shards here. This is mandatory. This is the main damage of your build, so you definitely want to be putting max in here. Then you're picking up enhanced Ice Shards, of course, and then you have 2 choices here. You have greater Ice Shards and you have destructive Ice Shards. Now, I would say when you're leveling, this greater Ice Shards is the way to go, because this says that while you have a barrier active, which you're going to have a barrier active almost all the time because that's the sorcerer's fucking shtick, right? This is going to treat all targets that you shoot as if they're frozen, which means the Ice Shards will bounce off them and, you know, kill other things. All right, so good stuff. However, when you get to the late game and when you start doing content where you have to kill packs, where you have to kill tough enemies, anything like that, you absolutely need to be using destructive Ice Shards. And that's because sorcerer has a huge problem with applying vulnerable to enemies. There really are only a few ways for you to do this. This is one of the ways in which you can do it, and then we're going to have a few other ways in which we can do it as well. Actually, not even a few. It's even lesser than a few. So this just says that hitting enemies with 5 Ice Shards in a single cast makes them vulnerable, and this is really good for when you want single target damage, so when you want to be hitting bosses, packs, everything like that, because it gives you a reliable way to use your Ice Shards to introduce vulnerable on the enemies and then to capitalize from the damage on vulnerable. Now, of course, vulnerable took a massive axe to the face with the latest patch, but it's still, I would say, a worthy damage stat, or rather damage bucket. All right. Okay, so then moving us over to the defensive skills over here. I put 1 point into Flame Shield, and that's because when we're playing softcore, and by the way, this is the version of the build that we're discussing here. This is not the version that you should build for hardcore if you're playing Sorcerer. By the way, don't play fucking hardcore Sorcerer. So in this case, I'm putting 1 point into Flame Shield here because Flame Shield is one of our ways to basically become unstoppable and to be able to move out of CC and, you know, things that are locking us down. Which is another huge problem that the sorcerer has, because once you have exhausted your Flame Shield and once you've exhausted your teleport, you are hard stuck. So in those cases, when you don't have access to those 2 abilities, or one of them at least, you're usually fucking dead. So that's a problem, okay? But we put 1 point in here, so we get it. Okay. Next, we use teleport, which I've already mentioned, which is of course our main mobility skill, but also it's a way for us to enable a huge amount of damage in CC once we have the right collection of gear, items, and so forth. So in this case, we again put 1 point in here, and then I put one additional one in. It has teleport, which just gives us a decreased cooldown when we actually hit a bunch of enemies. All right. Then we absolutely, by the way, I did skip something. Up here, we take 1 point into devastation to give us 3 additional mana, and then we take 3 points into an elemental dominance, which gives us more damage on our core and mastery skills. I do also want to mention that if you go to my channel after this fucking stream, this video will be live, and then the link to diablo4builds.gg will also be there, so that you have an offline version of this build, so that you can, it'll be in the description of the video, so that you can see the fucking skill tree, and you can see my choices, you can see my gear, the preferences that you need for items, the Paragon board, the whole fucking thing. The whole build will be on there. Okay, so we also pick up glass cannon, 3 points into it. I get 1 point here from my gear, but you put 3 points into that. We take ice armor. Again, when you are playing sorcerer, where you're playing softcore or hardcore, generally speaking, you're running 4 defensive abilities. It's just, it is what it is. Okay, so we're taking 1 point into that, and we get 1 point into enhanced ice armor, which gives us more mana generation whenever ice armor is on. Now, it might not be the way that everybody plays this build, but the way that I play it is I almost always use ice armor on cooldown. So as soon as it comes off cooldown, I activate it because it gives me barrier, which enables a lot of my damage, but it also gives me this mana regeneration. Your biggest issue with this build is conquering the mana problem of the build, right? So that's going to be your biggest hurdle. When you just start out playing this, it's going to feel super hectic, because you're going to shoot 2, 3, 4 bursts of ice shards, and then you have to wait for your mana to come back, and that's going to make you, in a way, hate the build a little bit at the start. But this is the thing that you need to persevere through, and you have to find sources that give you more mana, and I'm going to show you all of them. Okay, this is one of them. Okay, then we go over to Frost Nova, which is arguably the second most important thing in this build. Frost Nova is our most reliable way of putting vulnerable onto enemies, onto packs, and onto bosses. Okay, and we get this through enhanced Frost Nova, which says, sorry, not enhanced Frost Nova, but mystical Frost Nova, which gives us vulnerable for 4 seconds, increased to 6 on bosses. Now, we also want to max this out, and that's not because we give a fuck about the damage or anything like that, because maxing out Frost Nova does nothing to the damage. What it does, though, is it increases the amount of it decreases the cooldown, so it makes the skill come off cooldown faster, and you want as much as possible Frost Nova as you can fucking get. So that's basically the point. So, and then again, enhanced Frost Nova means that when you kill enemies frozen by Frost Nova, it actually reduces the cooldown, so that's just another way for you to get it off cooldown faster. Okay, then we move on over to our conjuration skills, and this one we practically almost completely skipped, except for picking up precision magic, which gives us lucky hit chance increased by 15%. Now, this is the other very important part about this build, and once we get to the gear, it's going to start making a lot more sense. Lucky hit chance is super important for this specific version of the Ice Shards sorcerer that I built. I think that you could potentially build a critical strike, critical strike damage version of this build that maybe doesn't dip so heavily into lucky hit, but I feel like you lose a lot more control. You lose a lot more control of the battlefield that way. So then you just have to be dealing a huge amount of damage to kill enemies in time, because once they fucking make it through those initial barrages, they'll just murder you out. Whereas if you invest heavily in lucky hit, and through the right uniques and the right items, you're going to be able to lock enemies down in frozen for much longer, which means you have more shots on them and you have a longer time to kill them. Okay, so when we get over to the mastery skills here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up 3 points into Icy Veil, which gives us 15% increased duration on barriers. Barriers are not only what keeps us alive, but it's also a damage enabler for us. And basically it also, as you can see, gives us increased mana generation and a whole bunch of other shit. Okay. Snap Freeze here says that lucky hits, frost skills have just a flat 9% chance to instantly freeze. Now, you'll be surprised how often this happens. It happens a lot. So it's a case of like this will fire off, and let's say every 3 to 4 to 5 shots, combined with all of the lucky hit stacking that we're doing, is freezing like a whole bunch of stuff in an area. Okay. We are picking up Inner Flames here, which says that your pyromancy skills deal 3% increased damage while you're healthy. And this is going to make sense just now, because you guys will be looking at this going like, there's no fire skills in here. What the fuck are you doing? And then we also have Devouring Blaze here. The Devouring Blaze saying that you deal increased critical. This took a huge fucking hit in the patch, of course. So this is almost makes my eyes water looking at it now, because it's like not nearly half as good as it was before. But, you know, here we are. But you deal 42% increased critical strike damage against burning enemies. And if those enemies are immobilized as well, all right, that bonus goes up to 60%. All right. Now, I have 6 points in here, so I've got 3 in there, and I've got another 3 for my amulet. So, yeah. Then last but not least, we move over to ultimate skills. Well, this isn't last. We still got fucking key passives as well. But ultimate skills here, I use Deep Freeze. The reason why I use Deep Freeze is it's an additional oh shit button for me. Plus, it's a great way for you to get access to your skills, which are currently on cooldown. So if you're in deep shit, you can activate Deep Freeze. It's going to fucking slow down the entire battlefield. It makes you invulnerable. And in that time, your other skills all come off cooldown, which gives you an opportunity to teleport away or to double down and essentially, you know, try to fight your way out. Now, the other thing is here with Prime Deep Freeze and Supreme Deep Freeze is, as you can see, with Deep Freeze ends, your non-ultimate cooldowns are reset. That's good shit. And so it's like 100% cooldown reduction. This wasn't this way before. It was like a percentage, but that was changed in the patch. And then this says here that 10% of your life gets turned into a barrier for 6 seconds for each enemy that you throw. So it's quite common after you come out of a Deep Freeze to essentially have a massively full stacked barrier, which again is a good thing. It makes you super tanky. Now, you just pick up all 4 of these frost ones here. They're all good. Basically, what they do is they just make frost skills deal more damage to elites. They make you deal more cold damage to vulnerable enemies. They make you deal increased damage to chill and increased damage to frozen, which pretty much enemies are all the time that you're fighting. And then Frigid Breeze here is another lucky hit mechanic that says cold damage against vulnerable enemies has a 20% chance to generate 15 mana. So this is another way for you to get mana back. And as I said before, we're not going to be able to concentrate on one thing that gives us more mana or mana back, or 2 or 3. We're going to put our fucking poker into the fire and get as many of these abilities as we can to get additional mana back. Okay? And then of course we pick up Avalanche, because that is kind of like the you know, the bread and butter of Ice Shards builds, because this essentially makes it so that on a lucky hit there's a percentage chance that it'll give you a free cast of Ice Shards, and this cast of Ice Shards will actually deal more damage. So it's pretty good. Now, there are variants of this build that run Shatter instead, and it is a viable build for sure. I would say that it's possible that both of these are good in their own way, depending on what you're trying to do. I think Shatter is more suited for, let's say, farming content fast, whereas Avalanche is more suited for potentially pushing a little bit more difficult content. I would say it that way. Okay, so I said before that we need to talk about the enchantments as well, but of course an easy shoe in is the Ice Shards enchantment here, which means that any enemies that are frozen in your vicinity automatically have Ice Shards that fly out to them. And since almost everything that you do freezes enemies from Deep Freeze and everything like that, you're constantly going to be like a mobile turret battery as you move, and fucking Ice Shards just basically shoot out of you. Okay? Firebolt enchantment here is in a way like a little bit of the secret sauce here. Because what this does is whenever you shoot something, all right, whenever you deal direct damage to something, so you shoot them with Ice Shards, what this is going to do is it's going to apply a burning effect on them. And this burning effect will tick, right, on them. And while this burning effect is ticking on them, it'll count as if they're burning, which means that you proc this Devouring Blaze like situation, right? This shit. So this is how we tap into the additional damage on that there. And also I put 1 point into Fury Surge in the bottom here, which I kind of skipped on purpose because I wanted to come to it after we looked at the enhancements. But this then says that killing a burning enemy increases your mana regeneration by 50% for 3 seconds. So again, another mana recovery source for us. Everything that you shoot as you machine gun stuff down with Ice Shards is going to burn, and when you kill them, it's going to engage this effect and it's going to start regenerating your mana. Okay. So then I think next we would probably need to look at gear, and for that I might just need to move my face like over here so that none of the, you know, gear slots and stuff like that are overshadowed. Okay, we're gonna go through it from top to bottom. And first and foremost, we have Shared Misery on our headpiece here, and that is because we are CCing almost everything. in the game. All right, everything that we're shooting at, we're ceasing, we're freezing it, we're, you know, like chilling it, when we fucking frost nova stuff, everything like that. And this means that when you lucky hit, all right, it's gonna start spreading that effect around, right? So if you shoot a group of enemies and those enemies get frozen, then there's a 50% chance that that effect will just randomly freeze other enemies that didn't even get hit by the shots. So you will move your fucking CC through all the enemies essentially. This is really, really good. And this was almost I would say a game changer for me once I introduced this to the build. Again, because it goes off of lucky hit, you're only really going to start noticing the sexiness of this when you are able to hit lucky hits a lot. Now, on the headpiece itself, crowd control duration is really good. Cooldown reduction is really good. And then again, secret sauce here, lucky hit chance while you have a barrier. We have a barrier all the time, so once that barrier engages, our lucky hits just happen all that more often. And then total armor is also good. At this point in time, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that if you look at my eye shots, it has a base lucky hit chance of 25%. All right, and this gets ramped up when I have a barrier on me and stuff like that. So that basically then increases it, you know. Then your first unique that you're gonna, I wouldn't say need, all right, but this is gonna be a game changer for you once you know, like once you are in a position where you start progressing into more difficult content. This is going to really elevate the build once you pick up this item. And essentially what it does is it turns your teleport into an offensive tool. So when you teleport, close enemies get sucked in, and they also get stunned. All right, this does increase teleport's cooldown by a little bit as well, but the point is this gives you access to basically like jumping into a pack that sucks them onto you, it stuns you, and then you frost nova and it fucking freezes them, and now you have a pack of enemies that are essentially locked down, and you can move out, you can shoot them, all the while your eye shards are automatically fucking shooting at them, everything like that. So this basically just weaponizes, you know, a skill that you usually use to escape or to move around the battlefield. Next, Frostburn on here is really good as well, because again, because we are leaning so fucking heavily into lucky hits, this says that a lucky hit has a percentage chance to also freeze your enemies for 2 seconds. So it has an additional chance for us to freeze enemies, and enemies that are frozen can do dick to you. They can't fucking attack you, anything like that. They're basically standing there, and you deal so much additional damage to frozen enemies that it basically just chews its way through them. Next, we have the third unique, and yes, this is a triple unique build. I think you can get away with not using Frostburn and Ice Heart Brass, but I feel like both of these just take the build to like another fucking place. All right, if you don't have access to any of these uniques, obviously you just want to be focusing on things like increases to your main stat. You want to be focusing on critical strike, freeze duration. You definitely want to be having this percentage chance to restore your primary resource, like you see here, the lucky hit. This can roll on gloves and it can roll on offense, so you absolutely want to be getting this. Now, another reason to use Frostburn is because Frostburn hard rolls this, right? But if you don't have Frostburn, then try to get some gloves that has that on there. It's also a game changer. Now, the Ice Heart Brass, this says that enemies that die while frozen have a 20% chance to unleash a Frost Nova. Now, this can have a disgusting ripple effect on a group of enemies, where essentially you hit the first enemies in a cluster, accidentally one of them procs this effect, hits a Frost Nova. That Frost Nova freezes all the other enemies, which causes you to launch a whole barrage of additional fucking Ice Shards volleys against them. Those ones kill those guys, they Frost Nova, and it's just like, it wipes out a whole fucking cluster. So if you don't proc any lucky hits, it's not as impressive, but sometimes you only proc lucky hits and then everything fucking dies like it's, you know, the 4th of July. Okay. On the boots over here, I like movement speed, so while it's not super fucking necessary, all right, it is important that you need to at the very least be able to move around fast as a sorcerer, because you're so squishy. So you just kind of want to be fast and move, you know, avoid damage. So on here, for me, movement speed is always a must. And then plus ranks to, I think plus ranks to something like Frost Nova here would be great. I have plus ranks to Flame Shield here, which is, you know, poo-poo. But you want either plus ranks to Teleport here for a faster cooldown teleport, or you want plus ranks to Frost Nova here for a faster rank Frost Nova. And then, of course, mana reduction on here is also really good. Then when we get to the main here, sorry, I didn't even talk about the aspect. The aspect on here is fortune. So aspect of fortune, and this is basically your lucky hit chance is increased by a percentage while you have a barrier active. Again, you have barrier active all the time, right? So and you basically have barrier on demand. So if you keep your ice armor and you don't use it off cooldown all the time, you have barrier on demand. You can evoke a barrier the minute you need it. So if you're running around and you see a tough enemy, something like that, you go ice armor, bloop, you have a barrier now, you start fucking shooting, and you're gonna get the benefit of this. So this is just another way for you to like dip into like sexy, you know, lucky hit. Then on and again, this build, I think it's entirely possible that you could run this build with a staff, and that's because a staff, I think I have one here. Staffs have this, their innate thing that they roll is damage to crowd controlled enemies. Now you CC a lot of enemies, so this is a good damage stat to have by default. But the reason why I run a wand and an offhand is because that's 2 aspects instead of 1, because the staff you can only have 1, and secondly because the wand rolls intrinsic lucky hit chance, as you can see here. So again, just more lucky hit. Now on the wand itself, core skill damage is good, vulnerable damage is good, critical strike damage is good, damage to frozen enemies is good. All of those are good stats. Before the patch, I would have said absolutely fucking make sure you have vulnerable damage. Vulnerable damage took a bit of a fucking nerf, so I still think it's a really super important stat, but maybe it's less important now. So if you have a good fucking one that has maybe your core stat on it, it has core skill damage, it has damage to frozen enemies, and it has damage to distant enemies, that's not a shitty fucking, you know, wand. And then what you want on here is you want aspect of control, and this says that you deal more damage against immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. Now, before the patch, you could triple dip into this. What I mean by that is that you could have a situation where you teleport into a group of enemies, like a pack, and that teleport, because of raiment, is going to stun them. So that gets you your first 31% damage increase. Now you Frost Nova, and that immobilizes and freezes the enemies. That gives you this buff 2 more times, so you're triple dipping into it. That was fixed in the patch. This does not work anymore, at least according to the patch notes. So the point is, we're only getting the 1 set of bonus here. But I mean, you know, 31 is better than nothing, right? Okay. Then when we get over to our amulet, should I do it this way? Is somebody gonna have like OCD if I just jump straight across? Okay, so when we look at the focus, I'm using Storm Swell here. This lets me deal more damage against vulnerable enemies as long as I have a barrier. Again, I don't have to explain this over and over. We have a barrier all the time, and dealing more damage to the vulnerable damage bucket has traditionally always been good, and so it is really good. Okay. On your offhand, you want the lucky hit with the chance to restore a primary resource, which is what I spoke about on the gloves. It can roll on the gloves and the offhand, so you want it on both. All right, so that's good shit. All right. Then we want mana cost reduction on here. We also want lucky hit chance on here, and we want cooldown reduction on here. If you can't get lucky hit on here, what can also roll on this thing is a lucky hit chance increase if you have a barrier, which is not as good, but it's still usable. So that's what you want on the offhand. Then when it comes to the rings, okay, your rings, generally speaking, you can't go wrong with having rings that are like, let's say, for example, critical strike chance, critical strike damage, vulnerable damage, and like resource generation or something like that. Those are best in slot rings for almost all classes, but failing that, there are other options, the other mixtures of things that you can put in here, right? Like for instance, on this ring here, you can see that I have damage to distant enemies, I have lucky hit chance, I have vulnerable damage, and I've got some additional life. This is by no means a perfectly rolled ring, but it's still a fairly decent ring. And then on here I have Edge Masters, which gives me a damage buff depending on how much primary resource I have available. Now, generally speaking, with this build, what you're going to see, and we're going to do a run directly after this just to show how this performs. All right, what you're going to see with this build is that your mana will tend to you're either gonna, when you dip down, you're gonna dip down, but then you'll instantly shoot back up to the top again, right? So, and then it's just gonna like fluctuate like that. All right. Then On my second ring here, damage to chilled enemies, vulnerable damage, damage to frozen enemies, and critical strike chance. Again, like I said, not perfect rings. What you want, and I can show you some rings down here, which I would consider perfect rings. We have critical strike here, critical strike chance, vulnerable damage, and resource generation. Vulnerable, critical, crit damage, resource generation. These 2 rings are perfect. These are my Blizzard rings, and this would be, I would say, best in slot. Not just for this class, not just for this build, but for most. Okay. On the second ring, I have piercing cold, which is the ice shards one that says that your ice shards pierce a certain amount of times and then deal a certain amount of damage less. You want the damage less thing to roll as low as possible, and you want the pierce to roll as high as possible. So you want 4 and 20. That's going to mean that you're going to pierce the maximum amount of times, and you're going to not be nerfed your damage by that much. Last but certainly not least, we have our amulet here. Control impaired duration reduction is bullshit. We don't want that. But we want cooldown reduction. Movement speed for me on here is really good.
And my apologies for being late, but I got caught up with some punana.
And ranks at Devouring Blaze for me is really good. Now, this was a lot better before the patch. It's still good now, but it's not nearly as good as it was. In case, well, instead of control impaired duration reduction here, I would maybe want some ranks to defensive skills or something like that, which would just give me like additional ranks to most of my defensive skills, which would be pretty sweet. Like more ranks to my ice armor, more ranks to my frost nova, which can also roll +3, by the way, on the amulet. So that would be great. Okay, so when we then look at my the stats in whole and just calling into position some of these things, right? My critical strike is around 35. My critical strike damage is around 120. And this number does not have what you get from what's his name, from Devouring Blaze. So that goes on top of that. So with that, we get close to about a 170, 180 critical strike damage, which is pretty good. You'll see vulnerable. This used to be a lot higher. This was sitting close to 200 before the patch. That's obviously taken a bit of a hit to the face. Then you'll see my damage to stunned is fairly high as well at 184, which is a pretty decent bucket as well. And another one that's very high is damage with cold. And then of course we also have hold on, damage versus stunned, which is just like also super high. So basically your highest damage dealing I would say like windows is directly after you use a teleport and jump onto a bunch of enemies, because those enemies are going to be stunned. You're going to frost no enemies, they're going to be frozen as well, and that's going to be the time when you deal like just an exceptional amount of damage in that limited window there, basically. Okay, and then just last but not least, just looking at this, so we then have some mana reduction here, which is really good. Movement speed's fairly high. Cooldown reduction is great. This used to be high as well. And then our lucky hit chance bonus is super high, and this is what enables like a lot of the things in this build. So lucky hit chance with the barrier is also high, and my crowd duration bonus is also good, which means things that are stunned stay stunned for longer. 16% is not a lot, but it starts adding up. Things that are frozen also stay frozen for longer. And then lucky hit mana means that whenever I lucky hit something, then this generates a whole amount of additional mana for me in terms of regeneration. And that's why once you start ramping up in a fight and you're shooting a lot of enemies and anything like that, you're going to be dealing so many lucky hits that it's going to keep you topped up the entire time. It's going to keep your mana flowing in. Okay. Alrighty, then last, I think, but certainly not least, is we'd have to look at the Paragon board. And I'm not gonna, I mean, as I said in the video itself, there will be a link to the Diablo 4's GG, where you can actually see a lot of this stuff, and it'll be easier to follow. I don't expect you to come to this video every time and fucking pause it and look at all the shit, which ones to take, but I'll explain my decision making some of these. Your starter board, I think this is the same for literally single sorcerer. I don't think people necessarily build it different. You pick up Elementalist over here. In my glyph here, I use Exploit. And this gives me some additional vulnerable damage. This was, of course, vulnerable damage is not as attractive as it used to be, but, it is what it is. And then we also pick up, like, Elemental Balance here, which gives us more non-physical damage, meaning, elemental damage, aka, frost, cold, whatever you want to call it. Then for our second board, I move over and I pick up Icefall. And in Icefall, I end up putting Destruction. This gives me more critical strike damage. And on this board, I pick up Cryomancy, which gives me more cold damage. I pick up Polar Rime, which gives me more damage to chilled enemies. I pick up Frost, which gives me more damage to chilled enemies. So all of this is just about increasing your damage profile against enemies that are chilled or frozen, which those enemies tend to be a lot because that's kind of like what this build does. For our third board, we move over to Frigid Fate. Frigid Fate is all about dealing more damage to vulnerable... Okay. I think I was AFK for too long according to the game, so let's just go right back in again quickly. Okay, so before I was so fucking rudely interrupted, as said, I go over here and I pick up no, that's the wrong place. I pick up Frigid Fate. Frigid Fate is gonna let us dealing cold damage to a vulnerable enemy, and enemies that we shoot with our ice shards get vulnerable, and enemies that we hit with our fast nova get you know, vulnerable. So this will increase our lucky hit chance, and so the longer we fight, the more we cap out our lucky hit chance, which means the more lucky hits we get, which means the more freezing we do and the more mana we get back. So it's like a little fucking engine that feeds itself. In a way, it's the worst possible situation for a sorcerer to be in a long fight. You want fights to be fast and over fast with a sorcerer because you have such low survivability. The longer a fight lasts, the higher there's a chance of you fucking dying. So you want to be as fast and as efficient as possible to kill, and a lot of stuff like this, like Frigid Fate and all the other things, try to give you a little bit more advantage when the fight lasts longer by improving your stats, giving you more, you know, lucky hits, giving you more abilities to freeze and that sort of thing, giving you more mana. So yeah. On this board here, we put Imbiber on here. This is a huge damage bucket for us. And this gives us more damage while we're healthy, and that means while we're above 80% of our HP. We constantly tapping into barrier with this build, and you should always be looking at your health bar, and if you dip below 80, use a health potion and get yourself back above 80. And as long as you are there above 80, and as long as you are barriered up, then your health bar will not be damaged all that much, and you will be benefiting from all this additional fucking damage, which is a huge amount of damage. We absolutely pick up Oppressive here as well, which gives us more vulnerable damage. We also pick up Weakness here, which gives us more vulnerable damage. And then last but not least, we get Advantage here, which gives us some cold resistance. But the main reason why we come down here is this node gives us lucky hit chance. This gives us 5 on Advantage, and then the 2 side nodes to it give us another 5. So that's 10% flat just from these 3 points that we put in there, which is so fucking worth it. It's not even a joke. Okay. Then for our fourth board, we move over to Burning Instinct. Okay. Burning Instinct is where we put our control glyph down, which gives us a huge amount of additional damage to crowd controlled enemies. All right, pretty good. We also, along the way as we move to this board, pick up Kindling, which gives us more damage against burning enemies. Now remember, everything that we shoot with ice shots gets set on fire because of the what we've chosen in our enhancement slot. So Firebolt is going to, or Flame, is it Firebolt or Flamebolt? How fucking terrible am I? Motherfucking Firebolt. So every fucking Firebolt that you know, because we have Firebolt in enhancement, it sets fire to everything. All right. Where was I? Okay. So this additional damage to burning enemies is good stuff for us. Plus this area here also gives us a lot of additional damage to elites, which is, you know, fantastic. And we also pick up Cinders over here, which is more damage to burning enemies. So just all around good stuff. And then for our last board, we pick up Static Surge. All right. Along the way, we pick up Overwhelming, which is more damage to stun enemies. But we also want to pick this up because it just gives us a huge amount of additional damage to elites, which is phenomenal. And over here, we use Unleash. Now, Unleash is a bit of a strange one because what it does is it actually increases the bonus of blue nodes that it overlaps. So we get a big amount of additional dex here. We get a huge amount of additional damage to stun enemies because when you incapacitate here. But the other thing that Unleash does, which is really good, is as long as you have the additional bonus on this, it says that after you spend 50 mana, you deal 6.7% multiplied increased damage, and you gain 6.7% increased mana generation for 3 seconds. So just even more mana generation. We want that fucking mana. And then with our last couple of points, we go all the way down here. We pick up paralyzing, which gives us a huge amount of additional damage to stun enemies, but it also gives us 8 max mana. And we pick up all the side notes here, which gives us another 8 max mana, which means that all in all, we get 16 additional mana here, which means that your normal pool of mana, which is usually sitting at 100, and then whatever else you get from your gear on there, is now sitting at about 116 to 119, which means that when you fire off your ice shards, my ice shards cost 25. So I could shoot 4 of these and then I hit 100. And then by that time, my mana regeneration would at the very least have given me a 5th shot. Now at that time, I've lucky hit. And that means that then my mana regen ramps up significantly. And so this is how the engine essentially feeds itself. Okay. So now there's one last thing that I'm going to do just before we conclude in this is I'm just also gonna just run a dungeon quickly, because I don't just want to say that this works post patch and then it doesn't. So hopefully I don't die like a bitch. This is, by the way, we're going into a Nightmare 50. Now a Nightmare 50 is kind of like considered as the, I would say, the median, right? So what I mean by that when I say median is that at level 100, you should be able to do a Nightmare Dungeon 50 with, I don't want to say with relative ease, but it should not be something that fucking kills you outright, because then your build has possible holes in it, all right, which need to be addressed. This means that your enemies are at 104 while you are at 100, so they're 4 levels above you. So hopefully now I also want to just demonstrate some of the nuance of the build and let's call it the combo that you need to be doing. All right. So when I say combo, like your main way to kill a pack is to jump into them, frost over them, and then blow them apart. Okay. If you want to be even spicier and you want to increase the potential damage that you can deal to them, you can combine Flame Shield into that as well. Because remember, when you use Flame Shield near enemies, it sets them on fire. So you can augment it a little bit. Instead of just teleporting onto the enemies and then using Frost Nova, you can go Flame Shield, teleport, Frost Nova, which is going to introduce all of your CC and all of your dots and everything to the group of enemies, and then basically just completely take them apart. So like here, in, boom, and then here. So that wombo combo is essentially your main way how you deal with almost every threat in the game. And if you don't outright kill the enemies with that combo, then you simply reset, your cooldowns kick in, you reset and you wait, and then boom, boom, there we go. Now see, in this case, I didn't outright kill them, but the follow-up damage that I was dealing was enough to basically take care of them. Okay. Now, all of this also is still covered by you have access to some oh shit buttons. Like for example, in the case of, let's say, I don't know, let me find some. Maybe I'm not gonna look for it now, but when the situation arises, I will demonstrate what I mean by oh shit button. One other thing that I also want to mention is you don't have to do this wombo combo jump down shit's fucking throat the whole time, right? You can also just engage stuff from far away with your ice shots, which completely works. Like as you can see, you can just essentially engage enemies at the edge of the screen and then just push your way through them. You'll see I lucky hit almost all the time. Every 2 to 3 fucking hits, lucky hits. And then that freezes them and just spreads your fucking CC around. And whenever you get surrounded by enemies or it starts looking a little bit dicey, then you just engage your combo and you get the fuck out. Always keep your health topped up so you get that healthy bonus.
Fresh meat.
Oh my god, dude. Luckily that's way higher, like in terms of volume, than how the butcher really is. I almost like shat my pants. Although I did pick up this fucking buff, so I probably would have been able to take him. So I just like a little bit of pee came out. Okay, but as you can see here, this is I would say fairly comfortable. That actually got me a little bit, not gonna lie. Did I not free this guy now? Oh my god. Okay, barrier gone, so we go back up. So now in situations where you run into like a lot of AoE, a lot of trouble, a lot of shit in front of you, like also obviously always jump into these like there. So there you can see my health went down like a huge amount, and what I can do is I can give myself a little bit of a breather and I can just deep freeze. That resets all my cooldowns and I can just basically re-engage. As you can see, you take a huge amount of damage when you do that. This can be because of the affixes and stuff like that, but yeah, you gotta be the main issue is you have to be just, you know, it's probably the thing that upsets me the most about the sorcerer is that you can't just AFK this shit. Like some of the other builds, some of the other characters, you can kind of like just, you know, sleep your way through some fights. But with the sorcerer, it's like you always have to have your fingers on your escape buttons. You always have to be ready for, you know, things not going in your way. Yeah, so then one benefit of playing freeze against those dudes is if you can actually freeze them, then that means they don't spawn little spiders and everything like that, which is fucking lovely. Obviously get away from that fucking skeleton because he's gonna pop, and then obviously deplete my very limited fucking life pool. See, even that pack there, you can see I didn't use the combo on them. I didn't jump in on them. I just actually lasered them from below just with ice shots, which you can absolutely do with this fucking build. It's obviously way more fucking reliable if you do the fucking combo on them. And then in situations like this where there's just way too much shit on screen, you just engage that, you see whatever's left afterwards, and then you just mop up. Now you can, I think personally for me, I mean, deep freeze is like the the skill here that's dealer's choice. You can take anything you want. I know some people use another ulti, like they'll use what's his name, Inferno, which just means like a whole bunch of additional damage. Maybe, I don't know, fucking Jesus Christ, you could use Blizzard in here if you want or whatever. But I like the fact that ice shards gives me a way to avoid damage while also just letting me kind of like figure out which way to move on the battlefield. Oftentimes I just, you know, I just turn it on to take a drink. Let me show you what I mean. And it's just like a good way to pause the fight in your benefit. Okay, so we got one more fucking miner to go, and then we're good. Oh, this is an event. Should we quickly run it? Yeah, events can get quite messy, so let's do that. I cannot guarantee that these guys will survive, but we're gonna do our best. I mean, I can pretty much guarantee they're gonna die. Let's be honest. So I'll use this early now. And then by the time the fight is over, or near the end, I'll have access to another one if I need. Because it's gonna get really fucking full, most likely. See, you just kind of like have to just dart around the battlefield. Use your flame fucking shield when you need the mobility. I got 6 more seconds, then I can... Okay, I'll just let those go to the fucking stash. And I mean, you can once you get once you get good with the build, once you get a little bit practiced in, you can start making some big fucking baller moves. Like you can play hyper aggressive, just fucking dart across the battlefield, do some fucking sick shit. Yeah, and you too can melt some dudes. That guy is fucking unmeltable. Alrighty. And that's pretty much it. This is the Ice Shards build that got me to 100. I haven't changed a single thing from pre-patch to post-patch, so it's still exactly the same Ice Shards build. The only thing that I would say, I would imagine that maybe I mean, I'm trying to think if there's, maybe I'm playing it a little bit more safe or something like that. I don't know, it's fucking possible. But this is the build that I started. I switched to like hardcore gearing into Ice Shards around, like I would say level 60 65, and then I kind of just ran from it all the way there, and you know, added in, you know, all of the different aspects and everything like that. But this is the whole thing. I do want to allow for a little bit of Q&A at the end here. I've got some people in the audience here, so anybody wants to ask a specific question about this. Otherwise, I'm going to end the video. But yeah, this is the thing that got me to 100. I think it's still viable. Post-patch, it still deals damage. You are not going to be able to kill Uber Lilith with this build that I have here. You are not going to be able to push T100 in Nightmare with this build here. 100% not. But this will get you to 100. No problem, and this will allow you to play very comfortably with other players. You will be a very exceptionally you know, like damaging back row character, and as long as you can stay out of danger and everything like that, you're gonna be adding a lot of damage to the group, which is pretty good. This is also coincidentally, obviously you guys know this, but like a build that I've been using to carry people and stuff like that, and I think it did pretty okay for that, just because it deals so much damage. Once you get good at avoiding damage with this build, it's really gonna shine. I think the sorcerer has a huge fucking problem with build viability. It's not good right now, but at least this one still works, and I'm kind of happy about that.